Her species had never met a human before. The first thing Ethan Cross felt was cold. Not the comfortable chill of ship ventilation, but the deep, bone-reaching cold of dying life support systems. The second thing was pain, a dull throb radiating from his left shoulder where something had pinned him against the communications console during the impact. He opened his eyes to darkness punctuated by the rhythmic flash of emergency lighting, red strobes painting the command deck in intervals of visibility. In those pulses of illumination, he saw Martinez slumped over navigation, her hand still reaching for controls she'd never activate again. Captain Okonkwo's chair had torn free from its moorings, and Ethan's mind refused to process what the twisted metal and that particular angle of shadow meant. He was alone. The thought arrived with stunning clarity, cutting through the fog of concussion and shock. 7 crew members aboard the Meridian Dawn when they'd entered the nebula for routine stellar cartography. Now just him, breathing recycled air that tasted of copper and burned insulation, his emergency beacon broadcasting coordinates into a region of space human vessels never surveyed, because there was nothing here worth the fuel expenditure. No one was coming. Ethan's training took over, the mechanical sequence of checking suit integrity, activating personal oxygen reserves, documenting damage through the ship's failing systems. His hands moved through familiar protocols, while his mind circled the same thought. Survivor's guilt was supposed to come later, but it was already pressing against his chest like physical weight. Why him? Why not Martinez, who had 2 daughters waiting at Europa Station? Why not Chen, who'd been 3 months from retirement? The distress beacon pulsed its lonely rhythm, and Ethan stared at the signal strength indicator with something between hope and despair. Standard range in open space, useless in the dense particle clouds of the nebula. He might as well be shouting into a hurricane. He was still staring at the display when the impossible happened. The proximity alert, a system he'd assumed damaged beyond function, suddenly screamed to life. Ethan's head snapped toward the viewport, and through the swirling amber clouds of the nebula, he saw lights. Not the distant pinpricks of stars, but the deliberate geometry of running lights, moving with purpose, growing larger. A ship. His heart hammered against his ribs with such force that pain flared in his injured shoulder. Ethan lunged for the communications array, fingers flying across the cracked interface, trying to establish contact, identify the vessel, transmit anything that would prove he was alive and aware and desperately, pathetically grateful. Static answered him, but the ship continued its approach, and through the viewport, Ethan finally got his first clear look at something that made his xenobiology training feel laughably inadequate. The vessel defied every human design philosophy he'd studied. Where human ships were functional cylinders and spheres optimized for rotation and thrust, this craft looked like it had been carved from a single piece of dark metal, all flowing curves and angular protrusions that suggested both grace and aggression. The hull absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making the ship look like a hole in space itself, defined only by the warm amber glow of what he assumed were propulsion systems running along elegant fins. The design spoke of a technology tree that had branched from human engineering so fundamentally that they might as well have evolved on different worlds. Because they had, the realization hit him with a mixture of awe and primal fear. First contact protocols scrolled through his memory, procedures designed for controlled environments with full diplomatic support, not for lone survivors in shattered vessels broadcasting their vulnerability into the void. The alien ship matched velocity with the Meridian Dawn, with a precision that suggested either advanced automation or exceptional piloting skill. Ethan watched as a docking tube extended from the vessel's hull, moving with fluid certainty toward the Dawn's emergency airlock. Through his cracked console, he could see the airlock cycling, responding to commands from the other ship as if human security protocols were nothing more than polite suggestions. Ethan stood, swaying slightly as the deck tilted beneath him, and made his way to the airlock junction. Every instinct screamed conflicting advice. Hide, announce himself, prepare to fight, prepare to surrender. He settled for standing in clear view of the inner door, hands visible and empty, his face probably doing a terrible job of concealing the cocktail of hope and terror coursing through his system. The airlock hissed, pressurized. The inner door slid open with a sound that echoed through the dead ship like a judgment. The first figure through the door moved with a grace that seemed impossible in an environment suit. The suit itself was a work of art, form-fitting orange and white material that looked somehow both flexible and armored, with a helmet of what appeared to be transparent metal offering an unobstructed view of the face within. Ethan forgot how to breathe. She was tall, easily 6 feet, and her skin was blue. Not metaphorically, not a trick of the lighting, but genuinely, impossibly blue. Azure along her face and neck, darkening to deep sapphire where her suit's seals met her wrists. Her features were angular and elegant, with high cheekbones that caught the emergency lighting, and her eyes, golden with vertical pupils that contracted as she focused on him, held an intensity that felt almost physical. 2 more figures entered behind her, similarly suited and colored in varying shades of blue, but Ethan's attention remained fixed on the first. She raised one hand in what might have been a gesture of peace or simply a signal to her companions, and when she spoke, her voice emerged from a translator unit on her collar, the words English, but the cadence something entirely other. "You are injured." It wasn't a question. Her golden eyes tracked across his body with clinical precision, cataloging damage, assessing threat level, perhaps wondering what kind of being stood before her with such transparent emotion flickering across his features. "I'm alive," Ethan managed, and his voice cracked on the second word. "My crew, they didn't. I'm the only—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Something in her expression shifted, a subtle change in the way she held herself that he had no cultural context to interpret, but that felt significant nonetheless. She took a step forward, moving with that same liquid grace, and the emergency lighting caught the planes of her face in a way that made her seem both utterly alien and achingly beautiful. "You will come with us," she said. And though the translator rendered the words neutral, something in her tone suggested this wasn't standard procedure. "Can you walk?" Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. As she gestured toward the airlock, he caught sight of what might have been concern in those golden eyes, or perhaps just the reflection of emergency strobes. He didn't know yet that Commander Lissa Tharavan had just violated every protocol her people held sacred to answer his beacon. Didn't know that the simple act of retrieving him would set events in motion that would challenge everything both their species believed about emotion, about duty, about the walls they built to protect themselves from feeling too much. All he knew was that he was no longer alone, and that the being standing before him, with her azure skin and golden eyes, had somehow made survivor's guilt feel less like drowning and more like the first gasping breath after surfacing. The medical bay of the Whisper of Stars felt organic. Walls curved like shell interiors, lighting shifted from amber to gold. He'd been confined for 3 cycles, roughly 70 hours, with only Dr. Chalevris for company. The xenobiologist visited twice daily, her periwinkle skin and curious manner almost approachable. She asked about human physiology with genuine interest, occasionally gesturing before catching herself. But Ethan watched for Lissa. The commander appeared at irregular intervals beyond the observation glass, perfectly still. Those amber eyes tracked his movements with unsettling intensity. Sometimes she stayed minutes, other times seconds before turning away. When Chalevris finally entered directly, Ethan was studying Lissa through the glass. "Your isolation period has concluded. You present no contamination risk." "Does that mean I can leave, or that I'm safe to jettison?" Chalevris tilted her head. "Commander Tharavan mentioned you employ humor defensively." "She mentioned me?" The words escaped before Ethan could stop them. Chalevris' skin flushed darker. "The commander has assigned herself as your liaison. Human authorities have been notified of your survival, but you are 17 days from the nearest outpost. You will remain with us until transfer." "Is that standard protocol?" "There is no standard protocol," Chalevris admitted. "Your species and mine have never formally encountered one another. Commander Tharavan is improvising." The word hung heavy, suggesting improvisation wasn't something the Azurai did lightly. Before Ethan could probe further, Lissa entered, wearing a duty uniform, burnt orange fabric complementing her azure skin, her black hair severely pulled back. "Dr. Cross," she said, and hearing his title in her voice did strange things to his pulse. "If you are able, I will show you the accessible areas." Ethan stood, testing his shoulder. "I can walk, and it's just Ethan. I think we're past formalities." Her skin darkened visibly along her cheeks and neck before she reasserted control, coloring returning to cool azure. "Then you may call me Lissa." The ship revealed itself in layers. Corridors curved following structural patterns, lighting responded to occupancy. Crew members stepped aside, golden eyes tracking Ethan with curiosity or hostility. "Your people don't like me being here," Ethan observed as an Azari with steady steel blue skin watched with disapproval. "Sub-Commander Tarekshir believes your presence represents a security concern," Lissa said neutrally. "But you disagree." She didn't answer, leading him to an observation deck where the corridor opened to a transparent wall. Beyond stretched the nebula. Amber clouds shot through with veins of gold and crimson where stellar winds compressed gas into temporary brilliance. Ethan forgot the question. He'd seen nebulae through monitors, but this raw immediacy made his chest tighten with awe. "Your species finds beauty in natural phenomena," Lissa said, watching him rather than the view. "Documentation fails to capture the intensity of the response." "You don't," Ethan turned to face her directly. "Find it beautiful?" "I find it efficient. The stellar winds have cleared debris, making navigation less computationally intensive." She paused. "But I do not experience your physiological responses. Elevated heart rate, pupil dilation, the facial expression humans associate with pleasure." "That sounds lonely." Her skin darkened, that flush creeping from collar to jaw. "Loneliness is an emotional state. My people evolved beyond such inefficiencies." "Did you? Or did you engineer them out?" He shouldn't push, but something about her control made him want to find the cracks. "Because I've been watching you, Lissa. Your skin doesn't stay that perfect blue when you're near me." She stared, golden eyes wide, her control slipping. Her skin shifted through shades, azure to sapphire to almost violet, before she turned sharply away, hands clenched. "That's a biological response, nothing more." "If you say so." Ethan moved beside her close enough to see their reflections together in the viewport. "For what it's worth, thank you, for not leaving me with the bodies." It was the logical choice. Your survival provides valuable intelligence. "Lissa," he said her name gently, watched her reflection's eyes close briefly. "You don't have to justify saving someone's life." She didn't respond, but her skin remained that deeper blue. When she turned to continue the tour, she didn't put distance between them. They walked side by side, and Ethan caught himself noticing details beyond xenobiology, her liquid grace, how her hands gestured, explaining ship systems before she caught herself, the precise angle of her jaw when listening. He was in dangerous territory. Survivor's guilt, trauma bonding, human tendency to imprint on rescuers. He could catalog every psychological explanation for the warmth in his chest when she looked at him, but knowing the explanations didn't make the feeling less real. Over the following cycles, they fell into a pattern. Lissa guided him through the ship during off-duty hours, conversations shifting from technical details to personal stories. She described her desert homeworld with neutral words, while Ethan spoke of Earth's oceans with unguarded wonder. He made her laugh once, an actual laugh that escaped before she could suppress it, her skin flushing dark. They shared meals in the observation deck. Ethan learned to read her responses, how her pupils contracted when surprised, how her fingers tapped when calculating, the particular shade her skin turned when his words affected her. When a navigational crisis forced course correction through a debris field, Lissa brought Ethan to the bridge. His pattern recognition identified safe passage where Azari logic faltered, earning grudging crew respect. Afterward, Lissa found him alone in the observation deck, staring at stars that looked nothing like the ones visible from Earth. "You are thinking of your crew," she said, not a question. "I keep wondering why me, why I survived when they didn't." Ethan's reflection in the viewport looked hollow. Martinez had daughters. Chen was 3 months from retirement. What makes my life worth more than theirs? Lissa moved closer, close enough that he could see her reflection beside his. Perhaps the question is not why you survived, but what you will do with the survival you were given. Is that Azurai philosophy? No, her voice softened. That is something I am learning from you. He turned to face her directly, and the distance between them felt suddenly charged with significance. Why did you save me, Lissa? The real reason. Her skin darkened, that flush spreading from neck to face. I told you. I'm not asking for logic. Ethan stepped closer, watching her pupils dilate. I'm asking what you felt. Do not feel. You're feeling right now. He gestured to her skin, that deep sapphire betraying everything. I can see it. Lissa's control fractured. Yes, she whispered. I felt something when I saw your beacon. I felt something when I found you alive. I continue to feel something every time you look at me, every time you laugh, every time you make me question everything I was taught. And does that terrify you? Yes. She met his eyes directly, vulnerability naked in her expression. Because Tarekshir is right. I violated orders to save you. I continue violating protocol by keeping you close when I should maintain distance, and I do not wish to stop. Before Ethan could respond, the ship's alert system activated. Tarekshir's voice cut through the observation deck, cold and precise. Commander Theravon, report to the bridge immediately. We have received priority communication from the Admiralty. It concerns the human. Lissa's skin paled to pale azure, and Ethan saw fear flicker across her face before she suppressed it. When she looked at him, something in her expression made his stomach drop. Whatever happens, she said quietly, I do not regret saving you. Then she turned and left at a run, leaving Ethan alone with his reflection and the growing certainty that their 17 days together had just become significantly, dangerously shorter. Ethan wasn't allowed on the bridge during the emergency command session, but he didn't need to be. The ship's ambient lighting shifted from warm amber to cold blue, some kind of alert status, and crew members moved through corridors with quickened purpose. He paced his quarters, counting steps, trying not to imagine what orders the Admiralty might have sent. When Lissa finally appeared, her skin had paled to almost white blue, drained of color in a way he'd never seen. We're leaving, she said without preamble. Gather anything you cannot leave behind. Leaving where? What did the Admiralty? They ordered your termination. The words came flat, clinical, but her hands trembled slightly. You represent a contamination risk to Azurai genetic purity. I have been relieved of command and ordered to execute the directive personally or transfer you to Subcommander Tarek Shir for disposal. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. And you're telling me this because? Because I am stealing my own ship. Lissa's eyes met his, and they burned with something fierce. Dr. Shalevris has been monitoring communications. Half the crew will support me. The others will need to be confined. We have perhaps 2 hours before Azurai warships intercept. Ethan's mind raced through implications. You're throwing away everything. Your career, your standing. My life has been built on the principle that emotion is weakness and duty is absolute. She stepped closer, her skin darkening with each word. But I have learned from you that feeling deeply does not make one weak. It makes one honest. And my duty now is to the truth I can no longer deny. Which is that I choose you. The words emerged quietly, but they hit like a shockwave. Over my command, over my people's approval, over every certainty I once held, I choose you, Ethan Cross, and I will not watch you die for the crime of making me feel. Before he could respond, alarms shrieked through the ship. Lissa's communicator flared with urgent chatter in her own language, and she cursed, the first time he'd heard her do so. Tarek Shir has initiated mutiny protocols. We're out of time. What followed was chaos. Lissa moved through the ship with lethal efficiency, Ethan struggling to keep pace. They found Dr. Shalevris in the medical bay, already armed with 3 crew members, the ones whose emotional suppression had never been complete. Bridge is sealed, Shalevris reported. Tarek Shir has weapons control. Then we take auxiliary control. Lissa's tactical mind engaged. Ethan, I need you in navigation. Can you plot jumps through unmapped space? That's suicidal without proper data. We're dead if we stay in mapped routes. The Admiralty knows every relay. Find the spaces between. Her hand squeezed his shoulder. Do what Azerai logic cannot. They fought to auxiliary control, a brief, brutal encounter with loyalists that left Ethan shaking and Lissa's uniform stained with blue blood. She moved like water, every strike precise, protecting him with fierce devotion. At the control station, Ethan stared at readouts that made partial sense. He let instincts take over, finding patterns in gravity wells and radiation, threading a path through space that existed as theory more than certainty. There. His finger traced the route. Risky, but it leads to neutral space. Lissa studied it, then looked at him with wonder. You see possibility where we see obstacles. You see logic where I see hope, Ethan smiled. Maybe that's why we need each other. Her skin flushed deep blue. Perhaps it is. The ship lurched as Lissa initiated override, wresting control from the bridge. 3 Azerai warships materialized, weapons tracking. They will fire on their own vessel, Lissa said. That is how serious this is. Then get us out. She did. Hands flying across controls with practiced grace while Ethan fed trajectory corrections, their partnership transcending training. When she zagged left, he was already plotting right. When sensors screamed warnings, his pattern recognition found the gap. They dove into uncharted systems with warships pursuing, asteroid fields looming on sensors. But Lissa trusted his calls, following guidance that must have seemed insane to her logical mind, and they threaded the chaos while their pursuers fell back, unwilling to risk their precious vessels on human intuition. In the sudden quiet of the second system, a dead star's graveyard with radiation masking their signature, they finally had time to breathe. Ethan found Lissa in her quarters, sitting on the edge of her sleeping platform, staring at her hands. Her skin had darkened to midnight blue, and when she looked up at him, her eyes held devastation. I just destroyed the lives of everyone who followed me, she said. They can never return home. Their families will be shamed because of me. Ethan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Because of me, you mean? This is my fault. No. She turned to face him fully. This is the fault of a system that demands we be less than we are, that insists feeling makes us weak when it is the thing that gives life meaning. Her hand found his, tentative, testing. You did not make me choose this path. You showed me it existed. Her palm against his was warm, her skin shifting shades where they connected. Ethan interlaced their fingers, watching her eyes widen at the gesture. I keep waiting for this to feel wrong, she whispered, for my conditioning to override what I feel, but it doesn't. When I look at you, when you touch me, everything that should feel forbidden feels like truth. Lissa, I do not know if we will survive this. She lifted her free hand to his face, fingers trembling as they traced his jaw. I do not know if there is any future where your people and mine can accept what we are to each other. But I know that I would rather face death with you than life without ever acknowledging this. Ethan's breath caught. Acknowledging what? That I love you. The words emerged raw, unpracticed, as if she'd never spoken them before, because her language barely had the concept. That against all logic and conditioning, against everything I was taught to value, I have fallen in love with a human who saved me by letting me save him. Ethan closed the distance between them, his hand cupping her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Her skin was warm silk, darkening to rich sapphire beneath his touch. I love you too. God help me, I've loved you since you walked through that airlock and looked at me like I was worth saving. Their first kiss happened slowly, tentatively, as if both feared breaking something precious. Her lips were softer than he'd imagined, warmer, and when she made a small sound against his mouth, something inside him cracked open. The kiss deepened, became urgent, became the physical expression of everything words couldn't capture, gratitude and desire and desperate hope all tangled together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lissa's skin had shifted through every shade of blue emotion could produce, settling on a deep indigo that spoke of feeling too large for containment. We should return to the bridge, she said, but didn't move. We should, Ethan agreed, but kissed her again anyway. Later, when duty finally pulled them apart, they found Dr. Chalevris, waiting with news that changed everything. She'd managed to establish contact with human space, and an escort fleet was moving to intercept at the border. But Tarek Shir had also sent a coded transmission before they'd seized control. More Azrai warships were coming. Many more. The final confrontation was approaching, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that love alone wouldn't be enough to survive what came next. The border zone materialized on sensors like a promise, but between the whisper of stars and safety stood 7 Azrai warships, and approaching from human space, a smaller escort fleet that made Ethan's throat tighten with hope. They came, he breathed. For you, Lissa corrected. She stood at command, skin pale with exhaustion, but posture unbending. The Azrai fleet won't fire while human ships are in range. It would trigger the war both our peoples have avoided. So we're at a standoff. Until someone decides one human's life is worth the risk, her eyes met his, or until I surrender you. Ethan took her hand, threading their fingers together before the entire bridge crew. That's not happening. You chose me. I'm choosing you. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Before Lissa could respond, communications flared. Matriarch Korvat's face appeared, ancient and implacable, midnight blue skin and faded amber eyes holding centuries of weight. Commander Theravan, you were among our finest officers. You have thrown it away for emotional contamination. Lissa straightened, her hand still in Ethan's. I have thrown away a lie, Matriarch. The belief that feeling makes us weak. You ordered me to kill a being whose only crime was surviving and showing me that our walls are prisons, not protections. One human's survival cannot justify rebellion. Then perhaps what we have built needs examination. Lissa's skin darkened. This human taught me that vulnerability is not weakness but honesty, that loving deeply gives you something worth thinking clearly for. Poetry, exactly the emotional thinking that leads to poor decisions. Was it poor decision-making when his pattern recognition saved this ship? Dr. Shalevris stepped forward, skin flushed with boldness. Was it contamination when human intuition found passage our calculations deemed impassable? Or is it possible that what we engineered out has value? You speak of one instance. I speak of evidence. Every Azrai who followed Commander Tharavan did so because they felt it was right. Not optimal outcomes, but instinct to protect what matters over what is ordered. Murmurs rippled through both crews. Ethan saw recognition that the conversation had moved beyond one rebellion to questions affecting them all. You would have us become like humans, driven by passion, weakened by sentiment? I would have us become complete, Lissa said. Humans are strengthened by connections emotion creates. Their logic may be less precise, but their creativity solves problems we cannot conceptualize. They feel deeply, and that depth gives them courage we can only simulate. Ethan squeezed her hand. You're not weak, Lissa. The strongest thing you've done is admit that you feel. Korvath's ancient face remained impassive, but something flickered in those faded eyes. If we allow this precedent, if we permit emotion to return to our people, the consequences could be catastrophic. Chaos, division, the dissolution of everything that makes us Azrai. Or evolution. Lissa's words hung in silence. Our ancestors made choices appropriate to their time and circumstances. But circumstances change. We no longer fight for survival on a hostile world. We have the luxury of safety, and with that safety comes the opportunity to choose wholeness over efficiency. And if the choice destroys us, then we will have destroyed ourselves honestly rather than living as incomplete versions of what we could be. Lissa's skin darkened to deep sapphire, emotions undisguised. I love him, Matriarch. I love a human whose people we have avoided for decades out of fear of exactly this, and that love has not made me less capable of command, less intelligent, or less loyal to my crew. It has made me more myself than a lifetime of suppression ever did. Silence. Then Tarek Shir's voice entered the channel, still confined on the whisper of stars, but listening. Matriarch, I have observed Commander Theravan since this began. I believed her compromised, contaminated, unfit for command. He paused, and when he continued, something had shifted in his voice. But I have also watched her crew's loyalty intensify rather than dissolve. I have seen tactical decisions made with both logic and something else. something that accounts for factors our training never addressed. You defend rebellion? I defend observation over dogma. Perhaps the commander is correct. Perhaps we have mistaken amputation for evolution. More silence. Then another voice from one of the warships. My daughter serves aboard Whisper of Stars. She chose to follow the commander. I have reviewed her messages. She writes of feeling proud. Pride, matriarch. An emotion we claim not to possess, yet there it is. Another voice joined, then another. Not agreement, but questions, uncertainty. The cracks widening as officers confronted evidence that their training might be incomplete. Finally, Corvith spoke, and she sounded tired. This requires deliberation beyond battlefield decisions. Commander Tharavan, you are granted provisional asylum pending formal inquiry. The human will not be terminated. Lyssa's grip on Ethan's hand tightened, and the crew who remained loyal to me will not be punished for following their commander's orders, whatever my personal feelings about those orders. The matriarch's gaze swept across them all. But understand, this is not forgiveness. This is acknowledgement that you have raised questions I cannot answer with certainty. And until I have those answers, executing you would be premature. The transmission ended. Around the bridge, Azurai crew members stood in stunned silence before someone, Ethan never identified who, began a gesture he'd learned meant respect among their people. Others joined until the entire bridge acknowledged Lyssa with visible emotion they would have suppressed cycles before. Dr. Shalevris approached, her eyes bright. The human fleet is requesting permission to dock and transfer Dr. Cross. Ethan looked at Lyssa, saw the fear flicker across her face before she mastered it. You should go. Return to your people. You have been through enough. I'm not leaving you. Ethan, I am in neutral space without formal status. My future is uncertain. You owe me nothing. He kissed her, cutting off the protest, pouring everything he felt into the contact until she softened against him, her hands coming up to frame his face, her skin darkening to that rich indigo that meant feeling too large for words. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I owe you everything, my life, my capacity to hope, the reminder that survival means something when you have someone to survive for. He pulled back to meet her golden eyes. Besides, someone needs to teach your people that emotion isn't contamination. Might as well be the human who started this. Lyssa's laugh was watery, unpracticed, utterly perfect. Your diplomatic skills need work. Then it's fortunate I have an excellent teacher. They transferred to the human escort vessel together, Lyssa's hand in his, facing the uncertain future as a unit. Behind them, the Whisper of Stars hung in space between two civilizations, a bridge built from rebellion and maintained by love. 3 months later, they stood before a joint human Azurai commission, testifying about emotion and evolution, about the courage required to feel. Lyssa's skin shifted through shades of blue as she spoke, no longer maintaining neutral composure, and when she took Ethan's hand before the assembly, it was a declaration that some walls were meant to fall. In the audience, Ethan saw Azurai whose skin colors betrayed feelings and humans who watched with tears unhidden, two species learning from each other, the process messy and infinitely worthwhile. Lyssa glanced at him, her golden eyes warm, and smiled, a real smile, unguarded and complete. In that moment, Ethan knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they had already achieved the impossible. They had proven that love could bridge any distance, overcome any difference, and transform not just two people, but the space between entire worlds.